What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. Today we are talking value players. I've been looking through. I did a video on this last year where I had 5 value players. In this one I've got 10. There's a lot of choice. It's not necessarily easy to build a squad. But there is a lot of good value players that I think are underpriced this season. So I'm going to go through all 10 of them one by one. There's defenders, goalkeepers, midfielders and forwards in this list. Before I do that, I would say if you haven't already, make sure you do consider subscribing to the channel. Loads more videos coming through pre-season and throughout the whole of the FPL season. Doesn't cost anything to hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you know when all the other videos are going live. Otherwise, I will jump into this one. So before I kick off, I should say that we don't have the fixtures yet. They haven't been released at the time of recording this video, but it shouldn't matter much. I suspect that these players will either be good value at the start of the season or very close to the start of the season at some point. Maybe they're squad players or whatever it might be. So that shouldn't matter hugely. And we're going to start with Phil Foden, who I think is one of the most underpriced or value players in the game. And when we say underpriced or value, we're talking not necessarily just him at 6.5 million compared to other 6.5 million players, but also looking at other members of that team. So Sterling, Kevin De Bruyne, 11.5 million. Foden is 5 million cheaper. Will he score as many points over the course of the season as those two? Probably not, but he doesn't need to when he's nearly half the price of what they are. So Phil Foden's looking really good, playing for a Man City side that scored 102 goals in total last season. And could I see them doing that again? I don't see why not. They've got the attackers there. Yes, they've lost Sané, but they didn't really play him much last season anyway, and obviously they bought in Torres as well, and they've just got an abundance of attackers and good quality players in that side. And we saw post-lockdown that Pep Guardiola was much more willing to play Foden and use him more often. So in total he scored 5 goals and got 2 assists, but a lot of that came post-lockdown when he got more minutes. Now some of that was probably to do with the fact that the 5 subs was a thing, whereas that's not going to be a thing for the 2020-21 season. But I do think we're going to see him more and more, and this could be his breakout year. We've seen Pep talk about him quite a few times, saying that he's going to be one for the future. He's had his minutes managed, as a lot of young players do, but when he came to the side and he's been trusted in some big games as well, it makes you think that he's probably going to get more minutes this season. So yeah, there's going to probably be, with the schedule, again, fixtures aren't out, but it looks like there's going to be a lot of games in quick succession, which means Pep is going to have to rotate, which he likes to do anyway. So I think the one thing I would say with Foden at 6.5 million, you're probably going to see the odd bench in here or there, or maybe even every other game or something like that. But at the same time, you're probably going to see the odd big haul as well. He already got some double-digit hauls post-lockdown, and if he can carry that kind of form on into next season, then he could be a huge bargain. Is he going to play every single game? No. Are any players in that Man City team going to play every single game? Absolutely not. And when you compare him to other 6.5 million players, he really does look like great value. If you get him at the right time, maybe there's injuries in that City team or whatever it might be, 6.5 million is going to look like a bit of a joke when you compare him to the other Man City player prices. So next up is Greenwood. There's not really much to dislike about him either. A bit like Foden, he looks quite underpriced compared to other players in the team. So he's been changed from a forward into a midfielder because he was playing in that kind of right wing spot. Yes, he comes central. We see him get into the box quite a lot, but it's a similar position to Rashford, to Salah, to Mane, etc. So he's been changed into a midfielder. He's £2 million less than Rashford, who's playing on the opposite flank. And he's playing for a team that not only want to score goals, but they look like they can score more and more goals. It's hard to really talk about Man United from a whole season perspective, because for a lot of the season they were playing the likes of Lingard and Pereira. Bruno Fernandes wasn't in the team, Pogba was injured, etc. And since lockdown, yes, they've had some easy fixtures, but I think they've looked good. Even in the Europa League, yes, they went out and they did struggle to score goals in the last 2 matches. They created a lot of chances and a lot of shots. On another day, with a goalkeeper that wasn't playing like Superman, they probably would have scored more, including Greenwood. So I think he looks like a really good option. His underlying stats have not been fantastic. Like if you compare them post-lockdown again, when Bruno and Pogba were in the team, compare them to likes of Rashford and Martial, they're not quite as good. That doesn't mean he can't improve. He's a very young player. You'd expect him to get better and better. Is he going to be able to play week in, week out? Well, Solskjaer seems to think so. The only downside, of course, for him is if Man United make a new sign. And I think it's very clear to see that the first 11 is looking pretty good, at least in attack. Whereas when you start thinking about bench options, bringing on Mata, Daniel James, it's not something that Solskjaer wants to do. So you'd expect them to reinforce that attack in some ways. There's lots to talk about Sancho, of course. If he comes in, it probably makes Greenwood a non-option. But if he doesn't, then I don't really see who's going to play that right wing spot. I don't think Daniel James is going to get it. Juan Mata definitely isn't going to get it. So it looks like it's going to be Greenwood's. And for 7.5, like I said, 2 million less than Rashford, 1.5 million less than Martial, and 3 million less than Bruno Fernandes. Yes, his stats aren't quite up to scratch to those guys, But he is young, he can improve. And if he does, he's already scored 10 goals last season with limited minutes. Imagine if he gets a full season under his belt. Absolute bargain. So there's no doubt that Vinagre is going to be one of the most talked about 4.5 million defenders pre-season. Unless something happens like Wolves sign a new left back. And even then, people will probably think that Vinagre is still going to be first choice. Now, the reason for that is Johnny, who's their usual first choice left back, even though they usually play like a 3-5-2, 3-4-3. So essentially they're wing backs, which is even better from an attacking point of view. But Johnny is injured and he's going to miss a big chunk at the start of the season. And in my eyes, Wolves are one of the best defensive teams to target, especially when Willy Bolly is fit, which he is at the moment. Now, he cost 5.5 million, got 12 clean sheets last year in just under 2,000 minutes, which is a pretty good record. In fact, if you look at when he was in the team versus when he wasn't, you can see a big disparity between the amount of clean sheets Wolves got when he was in the team and when he wasn't. So he does cost 5.5 million, which is too expensive for me. But because he makes the rest of the Wolves team look like better options, so Soucek at 5 million and Vinagre at 4.5 million, it's really hard to argue against the value. And right now, Vinagre is an absolute lock. In any of my drafts, I'm going to need 4.5 million defenders to spend money elsewhere. And like I say, if they don't make a new signing, he will definitely be in my team. Now, you can see he got 0 goals, 0 assists last year, only 32 points, but he did play limited minutes. And of course, Doherty is the one that everyone wants, but he costs 1.5 million more. Now, we looked on Fantasy Football Scout at some of their per 90 stats. In terms of shots, Doherty has just over a shot every 90 minutes. Vinagre is 0.6, which isn't too bad. And chances created is even closer. So Doherty's 0.63 chances created per 90 minutes, whereas Vinagre is 0.51. So imagine he gets a bit of a bigger run in the side. There's no reason why he might not match Doherty, but he could get close for 1.5 million less. So I'm not saying you should go without Matt Doherty. I just think that Vinagre is a great option as well. So potentially, if the fixtures are good enough for Wolves, you could double up. When it comes to 4.5 million defenders, it really is hard to not keep talking about this man. Don't adjust your laptops, desktops, mobiles, tablets, whatever you're watching on. Do not adjust them. I am about to talk about a West Ham midfielder as being potentially good value. And we've seen him talked about quite a bit. He's been described as the new Fellaini for David Moyes. Now, forget about the Fellaini at Man United. We're talking about Fellaini at Everton under David Moyes. And we saw that he scored quite a few goals, was often deployed as like a number 10. Even if he was kind of in a midfield 3, he'd be the most advanced player, good in the air, able to score goals from open play as well. And that seems to be what Soucek is all about as well. Now, he's already scored 3 goals for West Ham already in 1,039 minutes. So that's not exactly prolific goal scoring, but not many players are only 5 million and class as midfielders. You know, you want to get Kane and Aguero, you pay a lot more money, 10.5 million for more goals. For 5 million, you shouldn't be expecting that kind of scoring record. He gets in the box. Like the match that I remember watching most with him is the Norwich game where they won 4-0 and Antonio scored all 4 goals. But Bowen and especially Soucek were unlucky not to score more in that. And you can just see how much, like everyone will say he's a defensive midfielder, but when you actually watch the games, you see how often he's in the box. He's a threat from set pieces, corners and free kicks as well. And if you look at the last 2 seasons, I think he's had something like 88 appearances, 33 goals and 12 assists. That's just over an attack and return every other game, which is pretty impressive for someone classed as a defensive midfielder. Now, I'm not saying he's going to keep up that record in West Ham in the Premier League, but he's already shown how far forward he gets. Now, whether or not you play him as your main midfielder or one of your main midfielders in a first 11 every single week, that's a tough one to call. It depends what you can do with that money. And as a 5th midfielder in a 3-4-3 where you're going to bench him most weeks, again, it's not the worst idea. I personally prefer going for a 4.5 million just to eke out as much money into my first 11 as I can. But I really don't think if you've got the extra money that Soucek is a bad option, because if one of your players gets injured or they have a bad fixture or whatever it might be, you can play him instead. So I do think he's going to get plenty of goals this season. I think he's going to surprise people that think he's just a defensive midfielder, and I'm surprised as well that he was priced as low as 5 million. So I'll be honest and say that Charlie Taylor is not the most exciting defender to own. I can tell you that as someone that owned him for a chunk of last season. He's not the most reliable when it comes to attack and returns. Only 1 assist in just under 2,000 minutes last year. But Burnley are absolute gold when it comes to clean sheets. He should return as first choice left back. He got injured towards the end of last season. He was kind of back training, but Peters kept his spot because he'd done pretty well. But I would imagine at the start of next season that Taylor will come back into it. Aside from that, you've got Bardsley on the opposite flank, the right back, who you could go for as well, both 4.5 million. But the reason I'm talking about them is this is where you have to start comparing them versus other players in their team. So we know Burnley are great for clean sheets. Nick Pope got 15 last season. He got 11, not the season before, but the one before that when he played for Burnley when I think Heaton was injured. So we know they're good for at least kind of 10, 11, 12 clean sheets, maybe even slightly more. If you want Nick Pope, you've got to pay 5.5 million. Even Tarkowski's 5.5 and Ben Mee's 5. So to be able to get one of the fullbacks, Taylor or Bardsley, they might not be the most attacking, but when you can get the same clean sheets as Nick Pope for $1 million less, it just seems like a bit of a bargain for me. So again, if the fixtures are good for Burnley, or if you want to play them in certain matches when they have got a good fixture, I think Taylor and Bardsley at 4.5 million look like great options. Maybe not as attacking as Vinagre should be under that Wolves in that Wolves team and in kind of the wing-back formation. But I think as 4.5 million defenders go, it doesn't really get too much better than Charlie Taylor and Phil Bardsley as well. So if you told me halfway through last season that at the start of this one I'd be talking about Che Adams, I probably wouldn't have believed you given how poorly he'd done in terms of goal scoring, FPL points, etc. But kind of post-lockdown he started to look a little bit better, was performing better, scoring goals. And you shouldn't just take into account the form, you know, from game week 30 to 38. But the start of last season was so long ago at this point that I do think you can forget about it a little bit. And I'm not sat here trying to tell you that Che Adams is a better pick than Danny Ings, but there is a big price difference, and that's what this video is about. Value players, underpriced players. Danny Ings is 8.5 million. Che Adams is playing as a forward in the same team, and he's only 6 million. Now, one of the concerns is, of course, would he get enough starts? They got Shane Long as well to contend with, but given the form he was in just before the season ended, I'd like to see him start the next season. If he does, he could provide really good value. Now, I did look at the stats from game week 30 to 38 when he was playing a little bit more. Now, he didn't play as much as Danny Ings. In fact, Danny Ings played just over double the amount of minutes as Che Adams. But when you look at the stats, expected goal involvement for Che Adams was 3.01, whereas for Danny Ings it was 5.68. So it wasn't double, even though he played more than double the minutes, which is pretty interesting. And even more interesting, shots in the box. Danny Ings had 22, bearing in mind he played double the minutes. Che Adams has 17, so he was getting forward, getting in that box and getting plenty of shots off. Didn't create as many chances, but he was having plenty of goal opportunities. That's really what we want from our forwards. That's where the points come in, for obviously the extra point for the goal versus an assist, and also the extra bonus points that they get as well. So my one concern would be a bit of rotation. Will Shane Long keep starting instead of him at every other match or whatever it might be? But if he keeps starting with Danny Ings, will Danny Ings be the highest scorer between the two? Possibly. Will it be enough to justify 2.5 million? I think it could be close if they get a similar amount of minutes. So Saliba is a new-ish signing for Arsenal. They actually signed him last summer from St Etienne, but he went back on loan to them basically. So he hasn't been available for Arsenal for the last season, but he is available now. He is training. He is only 4.5 million. So you compare him to other players in that side. Tierney's 5.5, Bellerin's 5, Leno's 5 in goal. Suddenly 4.5 million looks like a pretty good option. Now, one of the reasons he's got that price point is because we can't say for sure that he's going to start. I've seen some Arsenal fans think that he will be the first choice centre-back going into next season. Obviously, we can't say that for sure until we see some matches, maybe some pre-season matches behind closed doors or whatever it might be. But if he does, 4.5 million in a team which looked like they were improving defensively under Arteta. Arteta's also got a bit more time now to spend with the squad trying to improve them. It could be a real bargain. The only problem is this: whether he's going to be first choice. Arsenal do have a lot of centre-backs at their disposal. So Mustafi, Socrates, Holding, David Luiz, Chambers as well can all play centre-back. So it's not like Arteta doesn't have players to go to. He doesn't have to necessarily throw Saliba in at the deep end. But the good thing is the Charity Shield will happen, or the Community Shield I should call it now, will happen before game week 1. And Arsenal are in that. So if they play him, first choice, first game against Liverpool, then potentially we could say he's the first choice centre-back, and at 4.5 million looks like great value. So the good thing is you don't have to make your choice before you see Arsenal play. Just because they play in the Charity Shield or the Community Shield doesn't mean they're necessarily going to play week in, week out. Anyway, we've seen that before sometimes, that a player will start in that match and then not start the next one. But it does usually give you a pretty good indication of what the managers think is their first 11. So if he starts, suddenly you're going to become a bit of a bandwagon. So for the eagle-eyed viewers of this channel who maybe watched my videos last pre-season, you'll know that Jota was also on value players last season. But I think in some ways, because of Jimenez's price rise, he becomes even more potential value for me. So he didn't necessarily have the best season last year, 7 goals, 3 assists, whereas you compare to the one before that, it was 9 goals and 8 assists. And I think in that season, especially in the second half of the season. He played really well up front in a 3-5-2, and I think a lot of us wanted to see that this season. And they did play it at times, but they also played 3-4-3 as well, where he was on the left and maybe someone like Traore was on the right. So it maybe didn't go quite as planned last year, but he's still a quality player, and it's 6.5 million. Again, when you compare him to Jimenez, who's 2 million more, will he get the same points as Jimenez? Probably not. Jimenez is he's an extremely steady point scorer, basically, very reliable, whereas Jota isn't that. But he does cost 2 million less, and if you get him at the right time, he could be a real bargain again, especially if the fixtures are right at the start of the season. My only slight doubt with him, or slight worry, is I think the likes of Neto and Podence have played really well when they've come in, and if there are lots of games in quick succession, we might see a bit of rotation. But there are lots of games in quick succession. We could say that about any player. There could be any kind of rotation throughout any attackers in any team. So for 6.5 million, especially if he gets to start playing up front a little bit more, although again, this year we have seen, or last season in the 3-5-2, we did see Traore play up front at some point. So it's not like Jota is exactly nailed on, but I do think he's one of the best players in that team and is going to start more often than not. So 6.5 million, there's not many players around that price in the midfield. Obviously, we talked about Foden, but when you compare him to other attackers in that team, especially Jimenez, 2 million less, I think it could be a good pump. Okay, I know he's not cheap, and a lot of times when people think about undervalued, underpriced players, they think of cheap, 5 million, 6 million, maybe 7 million max. But Sergio Aguero at 10.5 million, it feels like he's potentially underpriced. On his day, can he outscore Salah? Can he outscore Mane on a given game? I think he can still. And so I think at 10.5 million, he's potentially a little bit, not massively, but a little bit underpriced. It's been a while, or at least it feels like a while, since we saw him under 11 million. And in that Man City side, which I've already mentioned earlier in this video, that scored over 100 goals last year, he's definitely going to be at the forefront of doing that. Now, I've made the mistake in the past of calling him a nostalgia pick a few years ago, and he's just absolutely continued to smash it since. He is 32 now, turned 32 in June. So potentially, you know, at some point over the next season or two, he probably is coming past his peak, and he's probably not going to be the future of that Man City side. But right now, there's nothing really to say that that's not the case. I know a lot of people think that Jesus will start breaking into the side more and becoming more of the first choice, but people have said that for the last 2 or 3 seasons. And I think Jesus is a different kind of player. He comes in and does a job for that Man City team, great at getting back, great at tackling, getting the ball back, pressing, etc. But when it comes to an out-and-out goal scorer, someone that's hungry for goals, there's just no competition between the two. I really do think that Jesus is a good player, a good finisher, but he's not on Aguero's level just yet. So I think writing him off and saying that Jesus is going to keep starting is a little bit premature. So I looked last season, his expected goal involvement, this is Aguero, was 1.01 for every 90 minutes. So basically, for every 90 minutes he played, he was expected to get a goal or an assist, which is pretty incredible. No forward really came too close to that who had regular minutes. The actual second forward was actually Jesus. So you just see, all you need to be is like that number 9 in the Man City side, and you're going to get chances. So if they don't sign any other forwards, I think Aguero is a really good choice. Of course, Jesus is going to get minutes at times, but we haven't yet seen a situation where they're both fit and Jesus is getting more minutes. Not for a long time anyway. I think when Jesus first came in, that kind of happened as Pep was trying to get Aguero to play the way he wanted to play. But since that's happened, he has really been the first choice. Now, if one of them get injured, then the other one is suddenly a great option because he's going to play more often than not. So Jesus at 9.5 could be underpriced, and so could Aguero. But right now, I do think Aguero is a little bit underpriced. Not massively, like I said earlier, but definitely a good option at that price. Okay, so this one is a little bit of a long shot, but has potential to pay off big if it comes through, and that is Martinez, 4.5 million at Arsenal. I'm not really sure why he was priced less than Leno. Now, if you ask anyone who the first choice goalkeeper is at Arsenal, of course they're going to say Leno, and rightly so. Ever since Cech left, he's been the number 1. We saw last year, right up until he got injured, he was the number 1 goalkeeper. But Martinez came in and didn't really put a foot wrong. So is there a chance that Arteta lets him keep his place, given how good he does? Maybe that's wishful thinking, but you never know. And a bit like Saliba, obviously you can wait for the Community Shield and see who starts in goal. But if it's Martinez, then suddenly at 4.5 million, he is a massive bandwagon. There isn't a huge amount of options at 4.5 million. You've got the likes of Ryan, you've got the likes of McCarthy. So it's not like there's no options. But there's very few. A lot of the, probably a lot of the goalkeepers that we would want are 5 million or more. Obviously, Pope's 5.5, I've already mentioned. Pickford's 5, etc. Martinez at 4.5, if he starts that Community Shield, I'm telling you now, he will be massively, massively owned by everyone who's got an FPL account. And he'll probably be the number 1 owned keeper. So it is a long shot because Leno has been the number 1 for a while now. Martinez has always kind of been a second, choice backup, etc. in that Arsenal squad. But he did come in, he did do really well, made some really, really good saves. So I think there's a tiny, tiny chance it could happen. But again, you've got the Community Shield to worry about first. You see who lines up there. If Leno lines up, then straight away Martinez isn't an option. But keep a close eye on that Arsenal team sheet because there are some potential bargains to be found. So that is it for this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Lots and lots of value players. Let me know in the comments below who you think are the top value players. Do you disagree or agree with any of the ones that I've put? I do think there's even more that I could have added to this list. Like I said, last year I did a 5. This year I've done a 10. I do think there's more. I think Pulisic at 8.5 million looks like a potential bargain as well. So there's quite a few more out there, but obviously we wanted to make this one the top 10. So let me know below if there's any more that you think. Give it a like if you've enjoyed it. Much appreciated. Really does help out in pre-season. Get those videos out to more people. And if you haven't already, do consider subscribing. It doesn't cost anything to do. Just click that red button, hit that notification bell. You know when all my videos are going live, of which there's going to be a ton before the season starts and a ton after the season starts as well. And lastly, if you want to follow me, Twitter, Instagram links are in the description below. And I do have a Patreon link as well. If you want to support the channel even further, get involved with the Let's Talk FPL community Slack channel, as well as WhatsApp groups and stuff like that. Make sure you click the link in the description below and check that out. Otherwise, I'll catch you tomorrow for another video. Cheers all.